Some artists spend a lifetime building a career. Others walk onto one stage for one night, and the entire world changes. Not just for them, but for rock music itself. What separates a good show from a moment that rewrites history? Tonight on Riff and Riot, we're breaking down the 10 live performances that didn't just shake a crowd. They permanently altered the course of rock and roll forever. These aren't your average concert highlights. We're talking about nights where legends were born, careers were resurrected from the dead, and the world stopped and watched something it had never seen before and would never forget. If you're new here, welcome to Riff and Riot, where rock lives and breathes. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a breakdown this deep, this real, and this loud. Let's count them down. Number 10, Guns N' Roses performing Welcome to the Jungle at the 1988 MTV Video Music Awards. In the summer of 1987, Guns N' Roses dropped their debut album, Appetite for Destruction, and it went almost completely ignored. The album debuted at number 182 on the Billboard 200. Nobody was paying attention. Then MTV, after pressure from their label, Geffen Records, reluctantly gave Welcome to the Jungle a few late-night plays. Slowly, the response was electric. By April 1988, the album had gone platinum, but GNR still hadn't cracked the mainstream. They were considered too dangerous, too raw, too real. The jungle is the worst here every day. Then came the 1988 MTV VMAs. Introduced by comedian Sam Kinison, Guns N' Roses walked onto that stage sandwiched between the Fat Boys and INXS. Nobody expected what happened next. Axl Rose, Slash, Duff McKagan, Izzy Stradlin, and Steven Adler absolutely torched that performance. The crowd erupted. The phones lit up. MTV awarded them Best New Artist that same night. Just weeks later, on September 10th, 1988, Sweet Child of Mine, born from a guitar riff Slash called a throwaway joke during rehearsal, hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Kurt Loder at MTV said it plainly. The most important band of 1988 was Guns N' Roses. One VMA performance, one stage, one moment. That's all it took to turn the most dangerous band in the world into the biggest band on the planet. Number 9, AC/DC performing Highway to Hell at the Countdown TV 1979. By 1979, AC/DC had been grinding for years, touring constantly across Australia and Europe with virtually zero radio support in America. Angus Young described the non-stop touring as a F-ing highway to hell. That phrase became a song. That song became their commercial breakthrough. Nobody's gonna slow me down! Highway to Hell, produced by Mutt Lange, became AC/DC's very first album to crack the US Top 20, peaking at number 17. It was their first platinum album in America. On August 4th, 1979, just 1 week after the album dropped, they played Madison Square Garden for the very first time, opening for Ted Nugent. Backstage that night, Bon Scott told a writer, "This is going to be one of the biggest bands rock's ever seen. And give us a year or two, and we'll sell this place out ourselves." He was right, but he never got the chance to see it. On January 27, 1980, AC/DC played what turned out to be Bon Scott's final show at Southampton's Gaumont Club. Less than 3 weeks later, February 19th, 1980, Bon Scott was dead at 33 years old. His archived Highway to Hell performances on Australia's Countdown TV show remain some of the most electrifying live footage in hard rock history. The The band considered breaking up. They didn't. Brian Johnson stepped in. Back in Black became a tribute to Bon and sold over 50 million copies worldwide. But none of it happens without Highway to Hell first blowing down the door. Number 8. Nirvana performing Where Did You Sleep Last Night at MTV Unplugged in New York. November 18, 1993, Sony Music Studios in New York. Kurt Cobain walked on stage in a second-hand cardigan, looking pale and hollow-eyed. He had specifically requested that the stage be decorated with stargazer lilies and black candles. When producer Alex Coletti asked if he meant like a funeral, Cobain simply said, "Exactly, like a funeral." Nirvana was the biggest band on earth. Their label wanted hits. MTV wanted anthems. Cobain wanted none of it. He refused to play most of their famous songs, telling Dave Grohl, "We'd seen the other Unpluggeds. Most bands treated them like rock shows, just with acoustic guitars." Cobain was reportedly going through drug withdrawals the morning of the show. Rehearsals had been so chaotic that guitar tech Ernie Bailey said he genuinely wasn't sure the show should proceed. But when Cobain sat down at that swivel chair he'd stolen from a production office because he didn't like the assigned stool, something extraordinary happened. They filmed all 14 songs in a single take. No retakes. Only 2 other acts had ever done that on MTV Unplugged. The set ended with a devastating cover of Lead Belly's Where Did You Sleep Last Night? And when Cobain hit that final impossible screaming high note on the word shiver, the audience was too stunned to applaud. After the show, MTV's VP Amy Finnerty told him the audience was speechless because they thought they were watching God. Cobain died 5 months later. The album was released posthumously in November 1994 and debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. The cardigan he wore that night later sold at auction for $334,000. Number 7. Johnny Cash performing Folsom Prison Blues. At Folsom Prison, 1968.
But that train keeps a rolling on down to San Antonio.
By 1967, Johnny Cash was in free fall. Drug dependency had cost him his reliability, his reputation, and most of his chart presence. He hadn't had a major hit in years. Concert bookings were drying up. His label, Columbia Records, had nearly written him off entirely.
I hear the train a-coming, it's rolling around.
Then Cash pitched a wild idea. Record a live album inside a maximum security prison. He had been obsessed with Folsom State Prison since 1953 when, as a U.S. Air Force serviceman in Germany, he watched a film called Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison. It inspired him to write a song from the perspective of an inmate. That song was Folsom Prison Blues.
The great sound behind me. 2 of them have been with me for about...
On January 13th, 1968, Cash and his band, along with June Carter, Carl Perkins, Aaron the Statler Brothers, walked into Folsom's cafeteria and performed 2 full shows for the inmates. Armed guards lined the walkways above. The warden had prohibited the inmates from standing. Nobody stayed seated.
People keep a-moving, and that's what torture.
The night before the show, a Folsom inmate named Glenn Shirley had slipped Cash a song he'd written called Greystone Chapel. Cash stayed up all night learning it, then performed it at the show with Shirley sitting in the front row. When Cash announced who had written the song, the entire room erupted. It was the loudest moment of the night.
And I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know.
Columbia initially promoted the album with almost no investment. It didn't matter. At Folsom Prison hit #1 on the country charts, broke into the top 15 nationally, went gold, and won 2 Grammy Awards. It didn't just revive Cash's career, it redefined it permanently. And Cash went on to testify before the U.S. Senate on prison reform and met with President Nixon to advocate for inmates. All of it traced back to that one morning in a cafeteria. Number 6, U2 performing Bad, Live Aid, Wembley Stadium, 1985. 1985, U2 had 4 albums and a British following, but America still hadn't fully opened its arms. Their only top 40 US single, Pride in the Name of Love, had peaked at a modest number 33. Then came Live Aid, and a plan that nearly became a disaster. Jack Nicholson introduced the band. They intended to play 3 songs, Sunday, Bloody Sunday, Bad, and then close with Pride in the Name of Love. What actually happened was very different. About 6 minutes into Bad, Bono climbed off the stage. He saw a girl near the barricade being crushed by the crowd. He'd been signaling to security to pull her out, and they couldn't understand him. So he went in himself. Bono pulled her to safety. He shared a brief, slow dance with her in front of 72,000 people and a worldwide television audience of 1.5 billion. The moment was captured on every camera. The performance of Bad stretched to nearly 12 minutes. So long they had to cut Pride in the Name of Love entirely from the set. Bono walked off stage visibly frustrated, certain he'd blown their biggest opportunity. He hadn't. In 2005, the girl with whom Bono danced revealed publicly that he had essentially saved her life that day. And within days of the broadcast, every single U2 album re-entered the UK charts simultaneously. The Guardian later listed Live Aid as the moment that turned U2 into global stars. The Joshua Tree followed 2 years later. The rest is rock history. One unplanned moment, one instinct, one dance. It made Bono the most famous rock frontman on the planet. Number 5. Led Zeppelin performing Stairway to Heaven at the Madison Square Garden, 1973. In the summer of 1973, Led Zeppelin was not just a band, they were a force of nature. Their North American tour shattered box office records previously held by the Beatles, grossing over $4 million. And nowhere did they burn hotter than at Madison Square Garden in New York City across 3 consecutive nights, July 27th, 28th, and 29th, 1973. The band brought in a full 35mm film crew to capture what became the legendary concert film, The Song Remains the Same. Page described the recording as epic. The 3-night stand has since been called one of the greatest extended live rock performances ever documented. Every song in the set list was a statement. Dazed and Confused stretched to over 20 minutes live. See, John Bonham's Moby Dick drum solo alone lasted the better part of half an hour. And when Jimmy Page pulled out his violin bow to play his guitar during the set, face bathed in colored lights, smoke rolling across the stage, the audience watched in stunned silence. Stairway to Heaven, performed at MSG, remains one of the most studied and referenced live versions of any rock song in history. The film premiered in 1976 and was remastered and re-released in 2007. Robert Plant himself called the final MSG night the last night of the last tour, and decades later, the footage proves exactly why. No band before or since has commanded a stage the way Led Zeppelin did those 3 nights in New York. If you've never watched it, find it. You'll understand everything. Number 4. David Bowie performing Rock and Roll Suicide at Hammersmith Odeon, 1973.
You're rock and roll suicide.
By July 1973, David Bowie had been touring non-stop for over a year. Aladdin Sane had hit number 1 on 100,000 pre-orders alone, a record not seen since Abbey Road. His manager had already mapped a full global stadium run for 1974. The money was flowing, the machine was rolling, and nobody wanted it to stop. Nobody except Bowie.
Love, you're not alone, no matter what of who.
The decision to retire Ziggy Stardust was shared with only a handful of people before showtime. The rest of the band had no idea. Sitting in the crowd that night were Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, and Ringo Starr. They tore through an electric 18-song set with Jeff Beck joining live on stage. The crowd was on fire, and nobody saw what was coming next.
All the knives seem to lacerate your brain.
Then right before the final encore, Bowie stepped to the mic and said, "This is the last show that we'll ever do." The crowd erupted into pure hysteria. It was front-page news across England the next morning. Everyone believed Bowie was retiring from music entirely. He wasn't. He was simply killing Ziggy Stardust, on purpose, on camera, and completely on his own terms.
Give me your hands, 'cause you're wonderful.
What nobody understood yet was that this wasn't an ending. It was a masterclass in reinvention. Bowie went on to become Aladdin Sane, the Thin White Duke, and one of rock's greatest shapeshifters. The full concert film is restored and available on YouTube. Watch the moment he makes that announcement. Watch the crowd shatter. The greatest careers aren't built by holding on. They're built by knowing exactly when to let go. Number 3, Queen performing Bohemian Rhapsody at Live Aid, Wembley Stadium, 1985. In 1985, Queen was considered past their prime. Their disco-influenced 1982 album, Hot Space, had confused fans and damaged their reputation. Freddie Mercury had been exploring a solo career. Guitarist Brian May would later admit, "Our personal relationships had all suffered. Freddie had stepped so far away, I thought we might not get him back." There was genuine fear the band was breaking up.
And shivers down my spine, body's aching all.
Then Bob Geldof personally called to invite them to Live Aid. Roger Taylor was the only member immediately enthusiastic. The others nearly turned it down. They were exhausted from touring. They almost didn't make it to the stage. But when they did, everything changed. Queen booked out the Shaw Theatre near King's Cross in London and spent a full week rehearsing their set, cutting Bohemian Rhapsody and We Will Rock You shorter to fit the time limit. It was not a spontaneous performance. It was a calculated precision strike. At 6:41 p.m. on July 13, 1985, Freddie Mercury sat down at a grand piano at Wembley Stadium and played the opening notes of Bohemian Rhapsody to 72,000 people. What followed is now part of history. Mercury strutted, preened, wielded a cut-off microphone stand like a scepter, and led 72,000 people in an a cappella call and response that has since been called the note heard around the world.
Life had just begun.
The set ran 21 minutes. In a 2005 poll of over 60 music industry professionals, Queen's Live Aid performance was voted the greatest live rock performance of all time. When their 3-year-old greatest hits album jumped 55 places on the UK chart the following week, Elton John told them backstage, "You bastards, you stole the show." Brian May said simply, "It was the greatest day of our lives." And Dave Grohl, who watched from home, later said, "Every band should study Queen at Live Aid. If you really feel like that barrier is gone, you become Freddie Mercury." Number 2, the Rolling Stones performing Jumpin' Jack Flash at Rock and Roll Circus, 1968. In December 1968, the Rolling Stones organized and filmed what was supposed to be a revolutionary television special called the Rock and Roll Circus. The lineup was extraordinary. The Who, Jethro Tull, Taj Mahal, Marianne Faithfull, and a one-night-only supergroup called the Dirty Mac, featuring John Lennon, Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, and Mitch Mitchell.
Right across my back, but it's all.
The Stones were supposed to be the crown jewel of the evening, but what happened after they filmed their performance shocked everyone in the room. Mick Jagger watched the footage back, decided that the Who had performed earlier in the evening and were absolutely on fire, had outperformed the Stones on their own special. He refused to release the film. The Rock and Roll Circus sat in a vault for 28 years. When it was finally released in 1996, audiences discovered one of the most raw and explosive Rolling Stones performances ever captured on film. Jagger in a top hat and cape, Keith Richards locked in a riff. Jumpin' Jack Flash performed with the ferocity of a band that had something to prove, because they did. The performance has since become one of the most studied and discussed live moments in rock history, precisely because of Jagger's decision to bury it. The fact that he found it lacking is itself a testament to the impossible standard the Stones held themselves to in 1968. When the world finally saw it, the consensus was clear. Both The Who and the Stones had been extraordinary that night. The full rock and roll circus is on YouTube, officially released. Watch it. It will rearrange your understanding of what rock and roll looked like at its absolute peak. Number 1, Jimi Hendrix performing Wild Thing at Monterey Pop Festival, 1967. Before Woodstock, before the world knew his name, before everything. There was one night in Monterey, California that launched Jimi Hendrix from a relatively unknown act into a global rock god in the span of a single performance. June 18, 1967, the Monterey Pop Festival. Hendrix and the Experience had been building a reputation in Britain, but in America almost nobody knew who he was. He had one album, Are You Experienced, which had just been released in the UK. He was booked at Monterey largely because Paul McCartney personally vouched for him to the organizers. What happened that night redefined what a live rock performance could be. Hendrix didn't just play guitar, he made love to it, played it behind his back, played it with his teeth. And when the final moments of Wild Thing arrived, he doused his Stratocaster in lighter fluid and set it on fire. Then he held it up, flames climbing toward the festival lights before smashing it against the stage. The crowd sat in silent disbelief for a moment, then erupted.
You move, look out.
The Who had destroyed their instruments earlier that same evening, but this was something different. This was ceremony. This was a sacrifice. This was the moment rock and roll became mythology. D.A. Pennebaker captured the entire performance on film for the documentary Monterey Pop. Released in 1968, when the film hit theaters, audiences who hadn't been there saw what had happened. And Hendrix's name spread across America like wildfire. His U.S. debut album, Are You Experienced, entered the Billboard Top 5 shortly after. Rolling Stone has called the Monterey performance one of the moments that permanently changed rock history. It was the birth of the Hendrix legend, and it happened in under an hour, on one stage, in one night.